Okay, next up we have ABx Group, ASX code ABX, and they have a market cap of around 18 million. ABx Group is a uniquely positioned, high-tech Australian company delivering materials for a cleaner future. Presenting for the company today is MD and CEO Mark Cooksey. Mark, welcome back. Please take it away.
Thanks, Paul, for the introduction, and thanks to everyone dialing in today. Let's go to the next slide. Just the disclaimer that I encourage you to take a look at. So ABx Group, our mission is delivering materials for a cleaner future. And we've identified two opportunities so far. The first one is creating an ionic adsorption clay rare earth project in Tasmania. And the second one is developing a process to produce hydrogen fluoride from a recycled industrial waste. And we have a third area, which is our legacy area, which is bauxite production. But I'm going to focus on the first two today. Next slide. Next one. So we've heard, okay, the rare earth markets are growing. What that really means is these four on the right: neodymium, praseodymium, terbium, and dysprosium. So they're about a third of the volume by market, but 90% of the market by value. So they're the ones you've got to focus on. Next slide. And simply speaking, there's sort of two different broad types of rare earth deposits. The one on the left is a typical hard rock deposit where the PR and ND represent a quarter of the volume of the deposit, but actually 100% of the value. There's very little heavy rare earths in those sort of deposits. On the right is a clay deposit, such as what ABx has. And here there's much more heavy rare earths, including, importantly, the terbium and dysprosium. So although that teal segment is only a few percent of the volume, it's half the value. So the world needs more dysprosium and terbium. Really, at the moment, we can only get them from ionic clay deposits, and they're almost exclusively only mined in China. So there's strong interest in creating a more diversified supply. Next slide. So ABx, we're active in northern Tasmania. So that in the middle there is Launceston, which is the second largest city in Tasmania, towards the northern side. We've explored in this area for bauxite for over 15 years. We've mined bauxite. And then during COVID, we had the idea to look for rare earths, and we've found them. We've got significant tenements, significant discoveries. And the two distinguishing features of our clay deposit are, number one, we've got the highest proportion of dysprosium and terbium of any in Australia, and very high by world standards. And two, the metallurgy is good. So we get, again, the highest extractions under the preferred conditions of any deposit in Australia. So they're the two distinguishing features for ABx. Next slide. And what the important thing on this slide is the blue curve. So I said our metallurgy is good. What that means is cost. So with a clay deposit, if your metallurgy is poor, i.e. you have to use more acid to extract the rare earths, your costs go up very fast. That's what the blue line shows. It's a very steep cost curve. So what we have is a situation where there's strong demand for dysprosium and terbium. That demand is forecast. You can look at different projections, but maybe grow by a multiple of 5 in the next 10 years. Where is that supply going to come from? And then you have a very steep cost curve. We think we're positioned towards the lower end of the cost curve. Next slide. So at ABx, we're really focused on creating the whole project. We're not just about trying to create a big resource. So we've thought about what are all the dimensions we need to address to create a project. Obviously, you start with the mineral resource. So we're currently at 50 million, or just over 50 million tonnes. That's compared to 5 million tonnes 12 months ago. The grade of 800 ppm total rare earth oxide is okay. We've got areas of high grade that we're looking to expand, but importantly, as I said a moment ago, we've got the highest proportion of dysprosium and terbium, which means that our basket price is very high. Low strip ratio, we're talking about depths of 5 to 12 meters where our resource is located. Processing, fundamentally, pH 4 means good metallurgy, lower cost. And then all the other dimensions of a project, infrastructure-wise, we're close to Launceston. It's a city of 60,000 people, good access to labour, less than 100 kilometres from the Bell Bay port, which is a deep water port, and good access to energy and water in northern Tasmania. Jurisdiction-wise, well, obviously in Australia, that's good for expanding rare earth production. Tasmania is very amenable to mining. It's got a long history of mining, especially northern and western Tasmania. And in the particular region where we are, just west of Launceston, we've been active in this region for a long time, say over 10 years. We know the regulators, the government's supportive, we know the landowners, we know the nature of the land, we know there's some areas that are very amenable to mining, other areas that are not. So we're able to prioritise our tenements and our exploration. And finally, we've got good people, a mix of very strong geological capability and then chemical engineering capability, and that's important in rare earths. It's not just a matter of mining the ore. There's a huge aspect is the chemical engineering processing to take it downstream, refine products, and to produce what customers require, meeting their specifications. Next slide. So our plan, we're trying to get a profitable project up as quick as possible. This year, so we're focused on better understanding the processing conditions, getting a better handle on the economics. We've started to do that already, but we're really trying to flesh that out. We've had lots of discussions already, and they're continuing with potential customers. It's the whole rare earth value chain, particularly outside of China, is growing and trying to grow at the same time. So we're talking to downstream customers who are planning to create plants, and they need supply, and we need customers. So those discussions are very prospective. That's both in Australia and overseas. And we continue to look for more rare earths, more drilling campaigns. We're drilling right now. And the focus is we're definitely going to find more tons. There's no problem with that, but also continuing to increase the grade, because that's really important, obviously, to minimise the cost of production. So that's our rare earth story. We'll go to the next slide. So now a different technology, but equally prospective. It's our technology for producing hydrogen fluoride and then aluminium fluoride. And we run this through a 83% owned subsidiary that we call Alcor. We go to the next slide. So aluminium fluoride, no one's ever heard of it. I originally come from the aluminium smelting industry, and I'd barely heard of it when I was there. But it's an additive you need to operate an aluminium smelter. So without it, literally, your smelter will not function. About 1 million tonnes produced and consumed per year globally, worth over $1,000 a tonne. So it's a $1 billion plus market. And most of the world is relatively self-sufficient. So China produces half the world's aluminium metal. They also produce about half the world's aluminium fluoride. And likewise, there's other aluminium fluoride plants around the world supporting their sort of regional smelters. So there's one in the Middle East, one in Canada, one in Norway. But the biggest aluminium producing region in the world without its own local supply is Australia. So we're number 6, I think it is, still in aluminium metal production, but we are totally reliant on imports of aluminium fluoride. So, and most of it comes from China. So if supply was cut off for any reason, literally it would be a week or two before you'd go, actually, this is really challenging to keep this smelter running. And if you shut a smelter down, even for half a day, it's $100 million to start it up again. Fluorine is pretty expensive. So you want to make aluminium fluoride here. That's actually not really economical if you have to import the source of fluorine, be it fluorspar, the ore, or hydrogen fluoride intermediate product, and we don't mine fluorspar. But what we identified is that aluminium smelters are increasingly producing a waste called tap bath that contains a lot of fluorine. It's actually 50% fluorine. So the obvious idea is, well, can we develop a process, a chemical engineering process, to take that waste and turn it back into the products we require? Next slide. So that's what we've done. So it's a beautiful little circular loop. You have a smelter on the right. It produces this waste, aluminium smelter bath. We've developed the Alcor process, which is a chemical process fundamentally. and it produces hydrogen fluoride, which then we further convert to aluminium fluoride and sell it back to the smelter. So from a smelter's perspective, it's fantastic. It's an outlet for their waste that's going to valuable products, and it also reduces the raw materials they have to buy because they get some of the aluminium fluoride from a recycled source. Okay, next slide. So it's a great idea. Got to see if it works. So we've done extensive work in a laboratory. This is in New South Wales, a bit north of Sydney. This started about 4 years ago. It's basically, we've basically demonstrated the chemistry works. So we can react this bath waste with sulfuric acid, produce hydrogen fluoride, and further convert that into aluminium fluoride. So the chemistry side's okay. It's now about the engineering. You know, we'd love to go and build a commercial plant tomorrow, but that's too risky without a better understanding. So we're now into the piloting stage. So this on the screen here is one pilot reactor we have at our lab. So you put about 10, 15 kilos of material in that, run it for a day. That works. The early results from that are going well. And we have a design and costing ready for a continuous pilot plant, ready to start the construction of that. We're actually in discussions with potential investors, some of whom have said, well, if we supported you, we'd want the pilot plant near us. We've said, no problem, happy to do that. Please make your decision to invest. So that's another criteria that we need resolved to then really fully commit to the pilot plant. Okay, next slide. And the ultimate goal is to build a 20,000 tonne aluminium fluoride plant in Tasmania. This slide shows the scale-up progression. I've done a lot of scale-up work. You've got to do it carefully and constantly work out what's the pathway to allow you to scale up as fast as possible without taking too much risk and spending too much money on a bigger plant too fast before you understand it. Okay, next slide. Okay, and that's the ABx story. So the rare earths and the aluminium fluoride are different, but the similar theme of identifying a good commercial opportunity where we have good technical solutions and pursuing those very effectively. So thanks for your attention. Happy to answer any questions.
So you mentioned earlier that aluminium smelters can't operate without aluminium fluoride, and China kind of has a stranglehold. So if you're an aluminium smelter in Australia, you're reliant on China. And you know, if you shut down a reactor, it's $100 million to restart it. So the point I'm trying to make is the importance of trying to source aluminium fluoride in Australia locally is incredibly important. Is that the case?
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, potential customers have said effectively, you know, if you could supply even just at the same price, but you could supply it locally, we're very, very interested. I've heard an aluminium smelter in Australia say, you know, we're under instructions to source everything we can locally rather than import. I mean, that's more a COVID consequence,
Yep.
but there's obviously multiple potential causes of disruption to supply into Australia. So we think the right thing to do is preempt that by having local alternatives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Another question here, when can we expect the assay results from the external laboratory on the batches, and are there any potential risks with these results?
Sorry, are you asking about rare earths or about alcohol?
With regard to, I think with regard to Alcor.
Okay, well, very soon we should be getting some. I know our senior engineer was talking to the lab the last couple of days, so I'd be expecting in the next, let's say, couple of weeks, let's say 3 or 4 weeks, we should have results from our runs on our batch pilot reactor that just happened late last year.
Gotcha. And you kind of touched this already, that regards to the status of negotiations with potential partners, investors, it sounds like your phone's been ringing pretty hot as of late.
Yeah, well, certainly, I guess number one is when we go and talk to any potential customer/investor in the value chain, whether that's aluminium or rare earths, we get a very good response, right? They think what we're doing is a sound strategy. It's attractive. They think we're on the right track. I guess the question about whether they would invest to support us, that's always, you know, there's multiple factors at play. We're making good progress. It's hard to predict if and when you'll secure one, but we think that's the right strategy for us.
Got you. And I believe fluorine was recently added to Australia's critical minerals list. How important is this for ABX and Alcor, and what support potentially could the government provide going forward?
Yeah, it is important. I guess two things. One, obviously, just a bit of profile that doesn't hurt. And two, there is more and more funding, government funding that you have to be a critical mineral to be eligible for. So clearly, being on that list is helpful. Up till now, we've only been able to investigate critical minerals funding for our rare earth work. We do have a $7.5 million grant for the Alcor project, but that's from the sort of recycling fund.
Yep.
So yeah, I was talking to the Critical Minerals Office yesterday, in fact, about the team that's responsible for fluorine and discussing what assistance they could provide to us.
Okay. And there's a question here. Are there any businesses looking to build rare earth processing facilities in Australia, or is that all done offshore at the moment?
Well, so I guess you'd say there's two. So Lynas is building a cracking and leaching plant in Kalgoorlie right now. So that's sort of the first part of the processing. The product from that will then go to Malaysia, where it's separated, an existing plant they have there, where they're separating that into the rare earth oxides. And Iluka is building a plant just north of Perth, which has both those process steps in it. You know, they're clearly the most two advanced. You know, they're actually happening, you know, in construction. I guess there's other prospects, but I'd say they're a further way off and, you know, less probability of happening.
Gotcha. And just to finish up here, Mark, when can we expect the next set of results from the recently commenced drilling campaign at Rubble Mound and deep lead zones?
Yeah, I would think, well, so we did drilling October to December. We don't have all the results from that back yet. We had some of them, which we announced a week or so ago. So I would expect within a month, we'd probably have the results from that. And then we're just now starting to submit samples from our current drilling campaign. So again, it's a rough rule of maybe 2 months from submit of sample to getting results is a good rule of thumb. So we'll have continuous results, I expect, over the next 3 to 6 months.
Fantastic. Mark, as always, absolute pleasure to have you on the show today, and you have a great weekend.
Great. Thanks, Paul, and thanks to everyone that attended.
Fantastic. Thank you.